The next selection is Maine's Black Future, conceptualized and created by Genius Black for the Maine Monitor.
Black Future.
My name is Genius Black.
My name is David Patrick.
And you are listening to Maine's Black Future. More from David and Genius in a moment. Now, a story from Maine's unique Black history. Sherman Kentucky Ferguson was born in Lewiston, Maine in the year 1909. By 1931, he had been making a name for himself as a boxer who, quote, appeared in several bouts at state fairs throughout Maine and always made a good showing, end quote, as published in the March 28, 1931 edition of the Baltimore Afro-American, a newspaper. In fact, Kentucky Ferguson, as he was called, had established his name throughout New England. But he didn't make headlines on this date due to his boxing prowess. Kentucky Ferguson and his fiancée, Cecile Labby, 19 years old at the time, were denied something notable, a marriage license. The Chicago Defender published a stark headline of their own, quote, "County Attorney halts interracial marriage," offering an arresting image of the Lewiston officials' discriminatory actions. The article continued, quote, "Racial prejudice delivered a staggering blow to Dan Cupid when County Attorney Redding issued an order on Wednesday to the city clerk of Lewiston not to issue a marriage license to Sherman Ferguson, 22 of Lewiston, and Cecile Labby, 19 years old, white girl of Auburn, end quote. Again, that's in the Chicago Defender. Published on March 28th, the same date as the Baltimore article. Also notable, Maine's laws against interracial marriage were repealed in 1883, making it legal. Now, 48 years later, we're witnessing segregation inside Maine playing out at a municipal level. The county attorney wasn't able to charge the couple with miscegenation, but they did charge them with fornication and were believed to be fabricating claims that Cecile was still a minor. Miscegenation. Let me define that for you. It is a noun, and it is derogatory, meaning sexual relationship or reproduction between people of different ethnic groups, especially when one of them is white. The word is derived from the Latin miscere, to mix, plus genus, race, meaning to mix race. Beyond the definition into application of miscegenation, the word came to popularity around Civil War times as enslavers aimed to degrade abolitionists and those against enslaving black people. Further, although you will find anti-miscegenation laws, as they were called, remember they weren't designed to protect anyone, rather to control non-white people, and designed to perpetuate racist ideologies. Getting back to Sherman Kentucky Ferguson, a black Mainer denied his legal rights, forced to avoid arrest, although he had not committed a crime. See, in 1931, Maine state and town officials broke the law of the land in effort to stop the marriage of a black American man and a white French woman. Think about that as you consider the state of Maine's unique black history and as we create Maine's black future. connecting the state of Maine's rich Black history to Black changemakers weaving Maine's Black future today. Today, I'm talking to David Patrick, an impactful leader and dedicated father. He has been named one of the 10 most intriguing Mainers by Portland Magazine. He has earned degrees in marketing and international business, as well as social work from the University of Maine. He has been featured in Social Work Today. He is also a co-founder of the organization Racial Equity and Justice, along with Desiree Vargas. He serves on the board of directors for Maine Initiatives, a nonprofit focused on funding organizations activating for racial justice. David was recently recognized as the 2023 Alumnus of the Year for the University of Maine School of Social Work. I'll let David tell you his story.
Originally, I was actually born in Florida. I was adopted when I was about 1 year old and then moved to Maine. I was born in Miami. I lived in a nunnery, so one of those Roman Catholic nunneries, like the old school ones that you would hear about, for about a year, and then I was adopted. One of the really unique things about my past that has kind of been like folklore in my family is that I had a possible twin.
Oh.
So I had a possible twin. I think it was like paternal, not identical. And at like the age of 14, I ended up meeting this person in Florida. Like we went to, I think, St. Pete, Tampa Bay. I ended up meeting them down there.
What was that like?
It was interesting, right? So I had seen photo albums with us together as kids, right? And so I didn't necessarily see a similarity, but this had all happened prior to Facebook, the internet, right? So to track people down, you had to physically write down their address. You had to look them up in the phone book, and so you couldn't find them.
When you said a possible twin, are you saying that this human is your twin?
So it's been muddled up as part of our family. So it was always presented to me that we arrived together and we were together for up until the point where I was adopted. At the time, like I didn't understand the significance of the moment. Anyways, yeah, so I went to meet this twin. I was very young at the time. I can't remember. I think between 12 and 14. The significance of the moment wasn't impressed upon me, right? It was treated like it was just a regular play date with somebody else. And then as time went on, then it started to resonate with me. It was like, oh, this is the first relative I have, right? Because I think what's really unique about, my son who's here and my other child is that you go through life without people that look like you, right? So like my son is the first person on planet Earth that has my genetics. Yeah. That I'm a part of, right? Yeah. That like genetically, not spiritually or emotionally or even familially, but physically.
But also, like you said, phenotypically, being an African American or a Black person in Maine, seeing yourself reflected in another human, phenotypically via skin tone, really does matter, and there's something galvanizing, kind of changes you. From what I understand, you kind of grew up in the Bangor area, but you were raised by your adopted family. You grew up with them from a very, very young age, but they are, in fact, white people.
Yeah. So my mom and dad are white, right? Like I think it's weird. Like people are adopted. Like, oh, but what about your real parents, right? Like those aren't my real parents, right? Like so, what makes somebody a parent, a mother, a father is through their actions, right? It's not through genetics or relationships or anything like that. It's through their actions. So yeah, my parents are white. We grew up in the Bangor area, specifically like the Orrington area, which is a weird town that is on the outskirts of Bangor. But
Orrington?
Orrington.
Shout out Orrington. Okay.
But we were able to reconnect. And so we ended up taking this road trip for a funeral. It was like a family reunion, and she was there. Right. She was there with all of our relatives from Alabama and Florida. So that's our hub, right? That's been our hub where everything flows from, is from the South.
Got you.
Specifically Florida.
And that down in that region. I remember when we chatted, you talked about growing up in the Orrington area. And then, I don't know if this was high school or in school, you said that there were multiple foreign exchange students that came to be with y'all.
Yeah. So we had, what'd I say? Like Honduras, Russia, Costa Rica, Jamaica, Belize. Yeah, just from an early age, right? So from my earliest childhood memories, I was always surrounded by diversity. Like I remember my friends, right? Like we would go to holiday events, we'd go to the park, we'd go to barbecues, and there would be kids of all different races, all different physical abilities and physical appearances. There would be all of these blended families, and it was just I had a very diverse childhood, right? It was just a kaleidoscope of different identities, ranging from people in the international community, people regionally, and then that kind of just blended together into us having foreign exchange students stay with us.
Okay. In terms of the foreign exchange students, these are folks that were like living in the household.
Yeah, they stayed with us. Yep, they stayed with us. They attended high schools and colleges in the area, really University of Maine for the most part, yeah.
So growing up, being yourself, let's say being a black man or an African-American growing up in Maine, touching base, and I would imagine having conversation with these people from all over the world, how did that affect you?
It was good. That environment, what I've noticed is, and what I've tried to instill in my own kids is like when you have diversity in your life and you see people of different backgrounds speaking different languages with different abilities, with whether it's kids in wheelchairs that are blowing bubbles and painting and playing tag with everybody else in hide and go seek, whether it's seeing people with different nationalities preparing different cultural foods and wearing different culturally appropriate or significant wardrobes for whether it's their faith-based or spirituality. Just having diversity better prepares you for life in general, I feel like. Just bigotry, racism, bias, all those, like those things weren't really, I had to be introduced to those things, right? Because I had such a well-rounded childhood that it was almost like I had to have my rude awakening. Like that had to be, the window had to be smashed for me to see what that looks like.
You know, in that analogy, it includes like violence. It includes a smashing. And unfortunately, I do think that that's something to think about as people are listening to this podcast and considering the continuum of Black influence inside of Maine. Understand that we have a lot of young Black people, particularly Black people that grew up in Maine. There was a point at which they became aware of being different. And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's that point, right? Like my son's sitting here, and there's been times I've been questioning. I'm like, I hear what's going on in the classroom. I hear what's happening. Is this point for him, right? And so that's been, especially my son goes to like a private school. It's not as diverse as I would think it is, and so sometimes I'm really thinking to myself, is this that point, right, that we all go through? And so for me, mine happened very early. There was no soft landing. I wasn't eased into it. It was step on the playground. First, I say 5 minutes, but it's really step on the playground in the first couple minutes, being called the N-word of kindergarten, right? Like I just got out of my car. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a merry-go-round. I walked to the merry-go-round, somebody in like a nice dress with like ribbons in their hair that was all made up for the first day of school with
Little
like
kids. Yeah.
And that's what, right? That's what's coming out of their mouth when they see a Black 5-year-old. And so I was aware, but even in that moment, I wasn't aware because you don't grasp it, right? Because it's not, it's met with actions, but the actions are like, the playground. And then as we're not going to play tag with you or things like that. But then it manifests and materializes, and those actions go from the playground to the community to the workplace to the criminal justice system to the bank to higher education, right? And it's all the same people that were using this language in kindergarten. So then when they end up getting power and they end up getting decision-making capacity, it's still there. So yeah, as a Black person in Maine, I had a very rude awakening. And then once you're aware of it, it's reinforced. Like it's reinforced in a way that they want you to know, right? They want you to know you don't get the same benefit of the doubt. Like I remember especially in like my mid-teens, getting in trouble for something very, very nuanced, right? I think a soccer ball went in through a window of like an abandoned school. Mm-hmm. We went in to get it. And then we came out. And like I remember the two other people with me getting like 0 consequences. And I remember me getting like probation, like curfew, house arrest, drug testing, all of this.
What's the difference in like the actions you committed going in?
Skin color, right? Like there's no difference. Like there's like 3 kids are playing soccer at a school. They go into a school. They get entirely separate consequences, right? And so for me, that was like the slap in the face.
Super eye-opening in the worst way, but super eye-opening to the reality.
Yeah, and that's not even the worst of it, right? Like that's not even the worst of it. I don't know how real people want to get the level of like introspection, but 15, 20 years ago, I remember my neighbor telling people in the neighborhood they were going to burn down their own like shed to see if they could get me in trouble for it. And so it happened. I had to go through this huge legal process. My parents had to get a lawyer. I remember one of these lawyers saying you should just admit to it, and then if you don't, then this could happen. And it was like talk of the town, and it was just this crazy thing.
And you didn't do it. They literally invented it.
They invented it, right? Yeah, right. But I stopped talking to this person, but my friend at the time is the one who told me. I said, well, you're going to say something, right? Oh, I don't want to get involved. Right? And so I had to go through all of this thing. Finally, I remember having to provide an alibi. Long story short, it worked out. It worked out, but there was no consequences for them, right? And so at an early age, as a Black person, you're given a different set of expectations and a different set of rules that you have to play by.
I think it's a critical point. And what we're talking about, to be clear, we're not just saying being Black here inside of America. We're talking about growing up Black inside of Maine, because that is very specific. And many of you know Maine is known as a place where there's not really Black people, where you're listening to Black people right now, and we are telling you our real lives. Racism, bigotry, ignorance can be loud in people's minds with no Black people to bounce it off of. I really want y'all to let that sink in. Those thoughts and feelings, the hatred, the judgments, they can reverberate, and they do reverberate through the minds of people. I'm just going to say in Maine, but they think that they don't exist in their mind because there's no Black people around them to bounce those things off of and recognize that there's really a problem. And I'm just going to keep throughout the life of this podcast giving y'all different ways to think about this. David, one of my questions is, did you feel like growing up in Maine, you were expected to forgive white people for using the N-word derogatorily towards you?
It's just this crazy crossroad that I know other Black Mainers that are listening have been through this crossroads of like where, right, you have somebody you're friends with, they use the N-word, right? You're playing a video game, that you beat them, you're playing a sport and you win something that's supposed to be good-natured and competitive, and I would say more so, less about good-natured and competition and more about if you do something to upset somebody else, the first kind of knee-jerk reaction is to throw out a racial epithet or derogatory term, right? Like, I just remember a lot growing up when there'd be like an argument or a disagreement, right? The N-word would just come out, right? Like that would be just the kind of knee-jerk reaction of, oh, this person who's my friend has done something and they're black, let me just automatically just revert to the N-word, right? And so I remember playing that game with myself of, this is my friend, they've just called me the N-word over something small. Do I want them as a friend? Do I want to be lonely? Should I isolate myself? Should I stop talking to them? Should I forgive them? Or should I make new friends, right? And that's the game that I know black kids in small or large spaces have to play on some occasion, is when somebody is really close to you, who you really respect and value and care a lot about, decides to use racist language towards you when they get upset at you. And you have to bring it upon yourself to figure out how to navigate it, forgive them, not forgive them. I still, in my mind, there's people that come to mind that I consider friends today, that I remember the day and the moment and the setting that they chose to say that to me.
I went to worldpopulationreview.com. I was just some things and looking at some stats. And then the state of Maine, right, 92.93% white. It's just in terms of population and the race of population. Now, 3.46% two or more races, and then 1.44% black or African American. Right? Okay, 1.4% black, basically 93% white, but 3.5%-ish multiracial or biracial. So in Maine, the thing I'm pointing out is that a lot of people phenotypically in Maine are used to seeing black people that are very light-skinned and they're biracial or multiracial. There's way more of that phenotype in the state of Maine amongst black people. And the reason I say it is that when you appear like a dark brown-skinned black person with coarse hair, people react to you differently.
But yeah, just your reaction, right? Being a brown person, like you get a look, right? You get a look that is difficult. And I think what's even more challenging is not how you engage with your environment, but how do you engage with yourself as a person, right? Because you, especially at critical developmental stages like adolescence and teens and things like that, like people need mirrors of reflection. They need they need to understand where they fit in this grand scheme of society, whether that's something as simple as friendships, as dating, as other skill sets. Like you have no metric to measure your experiences by, right? And so it's just this very isolating feeling. And then there's colorism amongst ourselves. I've heard, I don't want to speak on behalf of mixed race people, but it's for dark black people, it can be really, really, really lonely, but also in that loneliness, right? You realize there's nowhere to hide. There's no flying under the radar. There's no blending in. So you really learn to accept your individuality and embrace your uniqueness and embrace those qualities, because you have to be so self-aware of what makes you different. It's really, really challenging at first, but I feel like it puts you in a position later on to overcome, especially certain social environments and certain aspects and challenges that you later face in life, as being able to navigate such an isolating period of time.
There's going to be strengths that you can pull from that some people just haven't lifted those weights yet, so those muscles aren't strong yet, right? So you're right. There is a preparedness. You were talking about some of the difficulties growing up, and so talk to me a little bit about what it meant to be incarcerated for you.
I look at that period of time in my life, And it wasn't good. At surface level, being incarcerated is not good.
Can I ask you how old you were? Ish, like doing that?
Out of high school.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I went out of high school.
Oh, you don't mean like you graduated high school, then went?
No.
Yes, got it.
No.
Like out of high school, yeah.
Yeah, they yanked me. I remember at a state track and field meet, and they put me in the adult prison for like 2 weeks as a senior. Yeah, no, I've actually never shared this like publicly. No, I didn't get to graduate. They like suspended me and then said it was an accident, and then said even though it was an accident, I shouldn't have been suspended. Because of the suspension, I had too many absences to qualify for graduation. This all happened the last week of before you would graduate. They came and got me. Like, we're doing a marching practice in the parking lot, and they came and got me and said, "Oh, you're suspended." And they're like, "Oh, well, you can come back for another year." So why would I come back for another year of school when I've done all but 2 weeks of 4 years of high school? They said, "Oh, well, you can transfer, you can go to this." And I remember the vice principal saying, maybe school's not your thing. Have you ever thought about, learning a trade? He's like, maybe you should leave here and go to Job Corps. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I had scholarships to University of Southern Maine, USM, University of Maine, Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven. My guidance counselor at the time was phenomenal. I didn't realize how good he was until later. I was in a classroom advocating for a student of color, and he was there 20 years later. But that's another story. My guidance counselor was one who was like, "You should go to the school in New Haven. You're going to have a lot of diversity. I think it will be good for you to see diversity and to see people that look like you." And so that was going to be my plan. That's not what happened. I ended up being incarcerated, and initially, it was just crazy. The whole thing was crazy. It got to a point where it was like this life-altering coming-of-age experience, because up until that point, I'd been like county jails, and the demographic in a county jail is just like it would be anywhere else, right? It's not diverse. Then I got into like the state prison system, and man, there's so many black people. And the thing was, at that moment, like I'm pausing and reflecting on like what it's like the gates to open up and you see black people that look like you, your age, and to never have that experience throughout your entire life, to not have best friends or peers or people your age that are black men. And so I remember walking in, like, "Where are you from?" I said, "Bangor." Big, tall black guy with dreads comes up to me. He's like, you're over here with us. We're from Bangor, yada, yada, yada. Asked me if I need anything. He's like, "You got any lotion? You got this. You got what you need. Here, take all this." And then these guys just slowly embraced me. And like just slowly like hugged me in, wrapped me in to like building my self-confidence, building my self-esteem, building my self-awareness, things that I'd always been teased about, like, "Oh, you sound white. Why you talk so proper," right? They're like, no, that's good. That's going to help you later on in life. Like, what are you talking about? Don't let people say that to you. And things I've faced a lot of racial discrimination against from my parents and myself because of our family composition. They're like, "Oh, you have two parents? Who cares what race they are? You have two parents? Please embrace that." And so these guys just built me up. And when I say built me up, like I really can't articulate what it's like to feel lost and isolated for 2 decades, and then feel like you belong. And there's There's an entirely different discourse about a sense of belonging in a correctional institution for Black men. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that for a lot of the times, at least for me, that sense of belonging had been what I was missing. And from that experience, right, I was in there writing, people like, help me write this poem to my girlfriend. Is this the right spelling? Is this the right this? Or
Right.
help me do this appeal. I want to appeal this case. What do you think? Like, we know you were going to go to college. What do you think? And, help me study for my, I'm trying to get my diploma. Like, I need help studying. And at the same time saying, don't ever come back here. You shouldn't be here. This isn't a place for you. We're not sure what happened in your life where you wound up coming here, but don't. And right. And now these are my friends, right? Like as people have trickled out, we've stayed in contact. Like my kids are friends with their kids. And that was it, right? That was like the shedding and the coming of age. And like after I got out, like I just hit the ground running.
I don't know if a lot of people are aware, but like you said, not in the county jail. So that's a good point when you think about who's in the county jails, kind of go higher up the tier. There are jails in Maine where there's a lot of Black people. And I've heard this from other people that have been incarcerated or do programs inside or performances or different types of things. Yes, the stigma that there's not really any Black people in Maine, again, I'm breaking that down. That's not real. But I can tell you that there are Black people, lots of them incarcerated inside the state of Maine. That is... So we can talk about all the reasons. There's a lot of reasons why. But again, I think a lot of people don't know that because they don't go up in the jail and actually know who's in there. Every time I record one of the Maine's Black Future podcasts, I always take a moment to ask my guests to highlight for me some of the ways that you've been honored.
I get honored a lot in a lot of different ways, and it just feels good. It feels really, really, really good because I worked really, really hard to get to this point. I think what really started off as not really knowing the direction that I was going in life, really not having good bearings, has slowly manifested into this like very purpose-driven life where I've been able to take all of the traumas and negatives and setbacks and photosynthesize those into strengths and skill sets that I use to help other people. So like I've looked, if I hadn't been through what I had been through, I wouldn't have the credibility, expertise, or capacity to help other people, right? And so in that journey, one of the things that I was recently highlighted for was like I got like Maine's most interesting person of the year. I made that top 10 list, Portland Magazine.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then they put me on the cover, which I wasn't expecting at all. And so what happened was I started getting, so my parents called me and said, hey, what's going on? I was like, what do you mean? I was, well, we just got a bunch of these magazines with your face all over them. And your father just went to the grocery store and you're down there too. And I was like, oh. I said, I didn't realize I was going to be the cover picture. And so then over like the next day, I would say it was like a 72-hour period. It was a 72-hour period where people would keep messaging me like, hey, did you know that you're in this magazine? I was honored for the work we had done really around implementing policy at, I think, the municipal level in our communities. Certainly the voice that we had pre and post George Floyd and some of the initiatives that we had been able to introduce throughout the state of Maine.
Describe for our listeners who we is.
Really, partner that I work with, Desiree Vargas and I, we have a consulting firm, a nonprofit organization, And we had just kind of hit the ground running by doing just an abundance of community work that tirelessly, just nonstop marathon race of community work in the shadows, no bright lights, when nobody's looking, advocating for people on, Sunday morning, they're getting evicted from their apartment and they have nobody to help and nobody knows we're doing it, but we're doing it. Lots of work like that, connecting people with recovery services, connecting people with housing services, students and families dealing with discrimination in the school system, showing up and sitting in these meetings in the principal's office, sitting in these boardrooms with the superintendent and advocating and having discussions. And so all of that kind of came to fruition, and we were recognized for that. And I was recognized for the work that I was doing. What has also come from that has been recognitions from the University of Maine. Like recently, just a few months ago, I got the 2023 Alumnus of the Year award, which was given to me by the School of Social Work. And so when I attended that school, I'm sure I gave them a hard time. Certainly, I'm positive I gave the teachers there a hard time, but they have gone above and beyond to just highlight my work, uplift my voice. They've reached out and made me a contracted employee. I have a teaching schedule there. I teach a seminar specifically on supporting people of color in rural communities as social workers in healthcare. And it's just been an immense honor to go to these places. Specifically, I work with some school districts where I experienced significant and aggressive racism, not really just from the students, but from faculty and staff members, right? Sometimes the adults in these settings are worse than the kids could ever imagine because the adults know, right? The kids might mirroring or not really knowing what their words mean, but the adults know, and it's intentional.
And you're talking about when you were in school.
When I was in school. Yeah, well, now too.
Yeah.
Right now, it's no different, right? All these things that come out about these schools, every time that article comes out about a racist school, every school in Maine that hasn't done the work to address these issues should be lucky the news reporter didn't show up at their school and ask students of color at their school, because
it
could be any one of those schools. So nobody should be pointing a finger and saying, oh, I can't believe this school. Well, it's going on at your school too. So, but I say that to say, in that environment where some of those stories I told, being called the N-word, some of those things, I was brought back in to be a consultant, to help teach faculty how to better support not just Black students from marginalized communities, students who may not even, we get into things such as, are we making mandatory homework that requires internet access? And some students, their families maybe do not have the financial, means to have internet access, or maybe the student doesn't have the ability to participate in after-school events because they don't have transportation, let alone detention, which is now a detention for the family who has to find transportation to get them or leave work, right? And so it's really improving equity for everybody, right? Looking at who's marginalized, regardless of skin color or identity or anything like that, and how do we support them. But the point I'm trying to make is, whether it's the University of Maine, whether it's the city of Bangor, whether it's these schools I work with, I've been able to have all of these environments that at one time or another weren't very bright moments, at least in my personal psyche or my arc of life, now be environments that have uplifted me, highlighted me, and celebrated me.
You do work, community-based. You also do social justice-based work, equity work. But I also know that you are the member of at least one board with Maine Initiatives. And talk to me a little bit about the impact. I'm sure you're on the board because of the impact Maine Initiatives makes. And I'm a big believer in Maine Initiatives.
So a lot of the highlights that I was able to share, right? So my rising community profile is what put me in a position to be asked to join to join that board. Right. And so Maine Initiatives feels like this really critical gap that is really hard to find. And it takes some of the most marginalized, underrepresented voices and projects and ideas and connects them with the funding and the resources to make those things possible.
Yes.
Right. And specifically creates a space, right? It's still competition, right? And there's a discussion to be had about underrepresented community members competing for resources. But in 2023, what the evolution of access to resources looks like, and it's community members of color are the only ones who are able to apply to these programs. They're specifically designed for Black, Brown, and Indigenous community members to have access to resources that they wouldn't typically have access to.
Well, you can be Black or Brown or Wabanaki, depending on the program, but also serving of those communities. So you don't technically have to always be that, but of course there's preference there because this is specific work that they are doing and, drawing resources and finances to people in the community who are historically and even currently, unfortunately, underfunded.
Yeah, that's the point, right? The money has to be used to do things that are benefiting the community, right? And so if you're a person of color and you apply and the work you're doing doesn't benefit the community, then you don't get some preferential treatment. Like, I think that clarification is really important that you made, is that it has to be benefiting the community. And that decision is made by a collection of people in the community, right? It's not just a board decision. It's not people outside of the community picking and choosing what seems to be the trendy or cool thing. It's people that are going to be impacted either positively or negatively from policies and communities, things that are unfolding that are helping to make the decisions of how resources are allocated to other community members.
Big up Maine Initiatives, but it's much broader than them. It's about the work that they're doing, right, in the world of philanthropy and in the world of racial and social justice. In the show notes, I'm going to drop a link to their website. I would say check them out on Instagram as well. They are approaching the world of philanthropy, particularly when it comes to Wabanaki people, Black people, and Black serving immigrant-led, immigrant-serving organizations. They're approaching it in a way that I'd even say, I don't want to say revolutionary, it's innovative and it's pushing forward, and I believe that it is what's next. On behalf of Maine's Black Future podcast, working through the Maine Monitor, as y'all know, the Maine Monitor helps me editing with hosting the podcast and setting up all the digital media, the web stuff, letting me know the numbers, how many have been downloaded, giving me advice, all this kind of stuff. They give me a lot of support. Even though I dreamt up the podcast and I execute most of it. But what's cool is that for the first time, they have a fiscal sponsee, which is the Maine's Black Future podcast.
That's nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, because they're a nonprofit.
Perfect.
They're a nonprofit
perfect
newsroom.
Partnership. Yeah. That's great.
And that's the thing. We feel like what we're doing is maybe a model that other similar organizations, podcasts, or platforms in relationship with someone, because the Maine Monitor is all about reporting in the public interest of Mainers. I like being in cahoots with someone like the Maine Monitor because they are about truth saying. Grants for Change is something you should know about. It's what they call multi-generational, so it actually is given to you $15,000 per year, broken out over 3 years. I call it waves of energy, or injecting waves of energy, because money is energy. Over 60 some odd applications. It was a crazy competition. 12 organizations. This podcast you listen to is put together by multiple people, led by myself. And what's amazing is that we were able to secure that grant. And now moving forward, we have more than energy that we need to both promote the podcast. What I'm doing is building my capacity to be remote, to not per se have to be here at Portland Media Center, as much as we love the room we're in right now. I want to go to Bangor, right? I want to meet somebody.
I'll be your tour guide.
Hey, that's what's up. Coming up with building up my mobile rig ability when it comes to recording both audio and visual. So it was something where I knew that I needed to secure funding, and I was able to do that. And I really just want to, again, bring that full circle and say, It is Shout Out Maine Initiatives, but all the people that participated in the process, there were a majority of BIPOC people, meaning Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Not all BIPOC, but both the BIPOC and non-BIPOC people. I want to say thank you because the process was thoughtful. And I think that the cohort of 2023 going out into the state of Maine with these funds and being able to rely on each other and get to know each other better is like a wave of energy across the state of Maine, again, that I'm very honored to be part of. Couple cents and a couple extra pennies there about Maine initiatives, and particularly the Grants for Change Fund. The Maine's Black Future podcast has been awarded. In fact, we're going to start bringing you a lot more visuals. Talk to me about what are you working on right now?
I don't think I could even explain the trajectory or arc that I've been on of working multiple jobs. My wife just got her she just became a registered nurse after completing nursing school. That was a grind. We just bought a home, which if anybody's been following the news or the economy or anything like that, that was a very difficult process. And so I didn't have a lot of time to focus on what I wanted to work on. It was just like a wave. And if I didn't swim, then I would have been swept away. And so in the last year, I've kind of taken this, since buying a home, since my wife got through nursing school, I've kind of taken this step back to redefine what I want to do and what I really enjoy. And so right now, I'm a clinical therapist. As I said earlier, some of my most negative moments and most traumatizing events, I've been able to take those and synthesize those into helping others. I went to school, I got my master's degree in social work, and then later sat for the licensing exam to become an outpatient therapist. And so what I'm really excited about is following my passion for social work and therapy. What that looks like, I think right now is, I mentioned earlier that I'm teaching an introductory course at the University of Maine. Students working in rural settings of how do they work with underrepresented communities and ensure that equity is present in their practice settings. I'm hoping to further develop as an instructor and become a more formal fixture in higher education teaching, specifically as a professor and offering several courses regionally or certainly through the University of Maine. And so I've gotten to that point where I would like to have a teaching catalog of courses that I provide on a semester basis. In addition to that, being in the field of therapy, working with people who have encountered the most traumatic things that people could encounter and then are forced to pick the pieces up and put one foot in front of the other and take care of their children and their mental health and be in recovery and care for parents and other people and go to work and do all the things that life expects. I'm certainly devoting more time to developing my practice. One thing that I really enjoy doing is geek therapy, GEEK. It originally started as like a medium or through media that clinicians could engage with clients, right? And that media was exactly what it sounds like, right? We have to think a little stereotypical of like it was video games and some of those kind of pop culture things that people kind of think are nerdy or geeky or things like that. So video games, media, and they noticed that when clients felt like they were engaged around this shared connection or shared enjoyment of like a video game or a board game or certain characters, that they would open up more and it would be easier to have conversations with them. What I'm hoping to do is my own adaptation to geek therapy, It doesn't have to be video games or characters or comic book series or Star Wars fan fiction or any of this stuff. It's really like a medium or an activity that somebody enjoys doing in which they feel free and connected, right? And so I'll go. I remember one of the most fun times I've ever had was a client loved to play basketball. We'd been playing horse at a local basketball court. Then it shut down. We were forced to find another basketball court. And so the court we went to was like a kid's basketball court where the rim is like 2 feet lower. And so we had a dunk contest. We were so loud. The 3 and 4-year-olds there screaming their heads off looked calm to how excited we were playing basketball. So we were doing spin dunks and we were doing trick shots and we looked like we were in the NBA because the hoop's so small. But that immersive environment, right? I remember my client disclosing lots of things that they had never told me, right, after that. And so I take my clients fishing, go hiking. We love going to lunch, video games, walking around. What is this, Back Bay or Back
Cove?
Back Cove.
Yeah.
Back Bay is Boston, right?
Yeah.
So we love walking around Back Cove, having coffee, and so that's one thing I really want to expand upon is providing immersive therapy for people in an environment that they enjoy, right? Like some clients like gardening, weeding their garden, and talking to their therapist at the same time.
There's something to that. I mean, I think the same thing goes with music. Music opens people up in really a magical and powerful way. I love your excitement and like the way you're digging into these forms of interacting with people. Mental health is unfortunately not becoming a smaller issue or problem. So we need people that are pushing forward in new and powerful ways.
People are becoming more aware of the fact that mental health has played such a significant role in our community and really across the span of our life. Like self-care, I'm a big self-care person. I try to have good self-care and I do martial arts in my free time, right? It's like something that I started doing 3 years ago, and it's been impeccable for my self-awareness, for my self-discipline. I also started threading like that martial arts practice. Like my kids do martial arts for those same reasons, but for me, those same principles and practices, I had to start doing like mental health self-defense, right? Like being really aware of the premises of self-defense are walk away, don't engage, scan your environment, de-escalate, right? So I started having to do that with my own mental health of being like, if this is going to be, I can't do this at this time of day, commit to this on this week because of all these other things are going to put me in a place where I'm going to be at mental health overload, or it's going to be pulling from my family, or I'm going to give my best self to everybody outside of my home. And then when I walk in the door, my wife, my kids, my dad, they get whatever's left over, right? They get the scraps. And so I've had to really learn to have really good mental health self-defense so I can be present, not just for work and the community and things like that, but be present for myself, which allows me to be present for other people.
I love that. I appreciate it so much. I think that's good black man talk. That's good man talk in general. You don't want to end up delivering scraps to your family and the people you love the most because you're letting the world just take more energy than you have to give them while maintaining a balance. That's a lesson for me too. That's something to really think about. I appreciate you saying that. You know, I'm going to give you a second to talk about it, but because it's towards the end of the podcast, I know it's one of those lingering thought kind of moments for a lot of our listeners when they can get through the whole podcast. So, you know, we're going to move to the last question. David, what do you think, sense, and feel for Maine's black future?
I think it's good, right? I don't know why, like, for whatever reason with our communities, we're always deficit focused. It always starts from a point of like a deficit or a negative or like a barrier or like this oppressive lens. Like, I'm really hopeful. Like, Maine is just super duper unique. Like, I come from the that group of people that's proud to be like a man. Like you can't see, but I got my LL Bean.
Yeah, he got a fresh LL
I got my
Bean.
LL Bean, man.
Yeah.
Like this is Maine. Like you got your LL Bean, you got your New Balance. Like we have this rich culture. We get Lobster, we got Bar Harbor,
Yeah.
we got Baxter State Park. Like we have a culture. Like we need to embrace it. Like, and I think there's just a huge opportunity, whether it's the hip hop scene, whether it's the art and creative spaces, whether it's nobody can point to what is cultural kind of pillars of being a Black Mainer, right? What are they? Like New York, you got Tim's, you got like you got
cultural pillars. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
You got like of your fashion, right? And then of your music, right? You got Biggie, then you got like your Yankees fitted. Like Maine, we need that, right? We need.
Like who are the Black Mainers?
Yeah, like what are you wearing? Oh, you got your New Balance. Oh, okay, you got your Portland. Oh, I see. You got your whoopie pie recipe in your back pocket, right? like you know what I mean? Like we have the ability to define that, right? And the cool thing about Maine is like we're a mixing pot. Like so that's what I think. Like Maine, we have this unique opportunity, right? If you have a skill set and you have something that to provide the community, getting it to the people in the community, I feel like there's not as many roadblocks because like just like they say about Maine being one big small town, it's that way for Black people too. It definitely is. It definitely is. Like me and you met a decade and a half ago, right? And now we're back connected, and so I just think the future of Maine possesses such an opportunity for us to define our future instead of having it be defined for us. And there's so much uncharted opportunity and untapped potential and talented people. I'm just really excited for what Black Mainers have to offer the state of Maine.
That being said, I really appreciate you taking the time, coming through, answering questions, you know what I'm saying? You brought Lil David with you. That was dope too. Sitting for my photos, all that good stuff. For the listeners, check the show notes, check the conversation, share this conversation. Lastly, I will say, my name is Genius Black, and you have been listening to Maine's Black Future.